Hello everyone, this is Fernando for the latest Urban Legends video. This is going to be part 2 of the Dyatlov Pass Incident. Part 1 is already available, so if you have a chance, check it out. Part 1, I talked about what started the incident, the group themselves, some of the bodies found, and this will be part 2, which is the rest of the incident, some of the other bodies found, and then theories as to why they were found that way and what happened to them. So again, check out part 1 when you have a chance, and then part 2 here will finish the rest. So alright, so last when I finished, I was telling that the leader of the group, Dyatlov, was found about 900 feet away from those other two people, the other two corpses, and with them, the two corpses being almost naked, and then the Dyatlov being found in a position where he was trying to defend himself against something. Shortly near and around that area too, yet another body was found. It was of a Rustam Slobodin, and what's interesting to note was with this particular person, they probably have the only, one of the two, I believe there's one other person, but their body was found with damage, like actual physical damage, and it was Slobodin's skull was found with a deep fracture about 7 inches long, and whatever caused this deep fracture, and again it happened in the skull, so it gives you the idea. Whatever was going after this Slobodin attacked this person, and then created a blunt force hit, like a punch or something with a rock or something with a stone, whatever. But whatever caused it created a deep fracture about 7 inches long in their skull. But it was surmised that it wasn't this attack that caused the death of Slobodin. In fact, it was just like with all the other people within the incident, it was the hypothermia, the freezing cold, that caused their death. But the Slobodin was key to note because they were one of two that had actual physical damage. And then also, this very same group, again, the investigative team found yet another person, like another carcass, and it was of a Zenaida Kolmogorov, and with her it was actually interesting to note that the body, they found traces of blood near and around her corpse, but it was never really determined or investigated whether these traces of blood were hers or if they were someone else's altogether. But in any case, what they did find is, they found her, but it wasn't told like how her condition was. Again, with some of the other members, they were found nearly naked, but with Zenaida, it wasn't discovered whether or not hers was found, like her body, like if she was also in an underwear type state or not. By the way, you're looking at yet another picture of the damage of the tent. It would look like it was reconstructed, but you'll see, like there was a deep gash again within the tent itself that would make, unless the tent could be repaired in a quick manner, it would make the tent completely unusable thereafter. So unfortunately for the investigative party, the conditions at that time were too horrible to try to continue the search. Again, being around early February, this was still the dead of winter, and so with the horrid conditions and the cold and the snow, it just made trying to search for any of the rest of the bodies and try to find exactly what happened all the more impossible. So it was delayed that the next investigation would occur sometime a couple months later, and this was probably during the thawing period, so that way they could try to find the rest of the bodies and then hopefully try to find a better answer. And this decision was made not in a lighthearted manner. This was probably after a good amount of debate, because they wanted to get down, in that case, the investigative team, also from the military, again, comprised of the government, and in some cases some of the other students from the institute. No doubt they all wanted to get down to what happened to this group, but because of the conditions, they couldn't do so. So fast forward to 1959, May 4th, so about a couple months later, and the search began yet again. And because of the spring thaw happening, then that let up the weather enough so that way they could start searching in a much more fruitful manner. And in fact, you'll see pictures of the new investigative team with regards to this search, and you'll see that some of the things that they were doing, essentially they had long metal rods, and they would just be poking the ground, poking the snow, probably as a spread out group in a straight line until they came across something that their rod would bump into in an unnatural manner, and then that way they could try to find and see, what caused it. So no doubt it was a fruitful search, because they were able to discover the rest of the bodies, but you could tell that something like this, it would have been a lot of work yet. And in fact, to give you an idea, when the rest of the bodies that were found, they were found beneath 12 feet of snow. So, how they were able to be found in those kind of conditions under 12 feet of snow is amazing, as a testament to the will that this group had to try to find the rest of the people and get to the bottom of the story. So, and the rest of the skiers that were found, they were named. There was an instructor named Alexander Zolotadov, an engineer named Nicholas Brignoled, and then some other students named Alexander Kolevatos, and then finally someone else named Ludmila Dubinina. And when they were all found, they were found actually fully dressed. Like in this case, they were not like the others that were found half naked, without shoes, that kind of stuff. In this case, they were found fully dressed, so it made more sense on their part. But yet again, in another mystery, adding to this enigma of this question mark that's all tied to the Dyatlov Pass incident, while they were found fully dressed, they were found with the most internal body damage, massive internal body damage. In fact, I had mentioned it in my other video that there was one other person that was found previously with like an exterior body damage, but in this case the rest of them had internal body damage, and what I mean is this, the way it was described, the way their bodies were found, the way that the bodies were damaged on the inside, it was as if it was quote unquote equal to the effect of a car crash, because they had suffered shattered ribs, they had suffered massive internal damage in the organs. Again, it's to the effect as if they were in a car and the car suffered a severe crash, but in a very mysterious manner on the outside of their body, no physical damage. So no bruising, no tissue being torn, no cuts, no gashes, no punches, like the after effects of a punch or the blunt force of an object like a long piece of wood or stone. Nothing like that. Pristine condition on their outside bodies, but on the inside, massive internal damage. Isn't that strange? Isn't that weird? Like, why would this happen? How could you find somebody that can suffer massive internal damage, and yet on the outside, it's as if nothing ever happened to them? I mean, nothing that would indicate it. Very, very freaky. In fact, there was a doctor by the name of Boris Vosrov. My apologies if I'm mispronouncing some of these last names, but they are a little hard to pronounce. But this doctor, he was the one that inspected all the bodies tied to this incident, and he was the one that came up with the conclusion that the force equal to create the damage of these bodies that was found, again, was equal to the effect of a car crash. So pretty freaky stuff. And again, I'm not posting pictures of the bodies themselves. There were pictures of them after they were found, and no, I'm not posting it only because, again, it's something that I don't want to do in this case. But again, to give you an idea, I'm trying to create a visual idea for you of what was the thing with them. So one thing though that was very interesting to find was the person that I had mentioned earlier, one of the students, Ludmila Dubinina. When she was found, she had the other physical damage. So remember, one of the other persons that I talked about, he was the one that had like a 7-inch gash of some sort, like he had a damage to the skull on the outside. This was the only other person that had physical damage on the outside, and it was her. But this was the freaky part. Her head was found to be tilted back, like her body. When her body was found, her head was found to be tilted back. Her mouth was stretched wide open as if she was screaming for her life. And then on top of that, her tongue was ripped out. So let me pause and give you a sense of how creepy that is. Whenever they found her body arched back. They found her head tilted back. They found her mouth wide open in a frozen scream, like a blood curdling type scream. And then on top of that, her tongue was 100% ripped out. It was gone. The rest of her body was fine, but there was nothing of her tongue left. How creepy is that? I mean, that just adds to this incident, the mysteriousness of this incident. Whatever happened to it, it's just something beyond normal convention. Also, they found that these remaining survivors, these remaining corpses, these cadavers, they must have lasted longer than some of the other bodies that were found, because they were found to have other clothing from the other personnel. In other words, the investigative group surmised that these people, while they were still living, they must have lived longer than some of the other members of the group who died earlier, and so because of this, they stole some of the clothing of some of the other members. And this was actually found because the remaining survivor, the only guy, that lucky guy that didn't go on the trip because he was sick, he was able to actually identify the pieces of clothing from each group, and he was the one from each group member, and he was the one that was able to point out that, hey, some of these people are wearing other people's clothing, so they must have put them on after that person died, in a way to try to make sure that they were able to survive as long as they could. Now, saying that, though, there were two individuals that were found near a ravine, and these individuals that were found near the ravine, they were again in an undressed manner. They were found with their underwear pretty much only on them, and in fact, the way they were found, they were found in a very huddled manner, I guess. The way it was as if they were trying to find someplace warm, and they were found near a ravine, in fact. But the way they were found, again, it was as if they were trying to I guess the best word I'm looking for is hiding under a bed. It's the best analogy. They were trying to get under something, to whatever it was, underneath rocks or underneath trees or something along those lines, as if they were trying to essentially stay hidden and then possibly stay alive as much as they could. And the way they were found, again, they were in an undressed manner, which was very similar to what some of the other earlier bodies were found, where again it leads you to think, why on earth would that be? Also, what's interesting to note is that all of these bodies, all 10 of them by now, whenever found, they were all noted to have a strange orange color tied to them. Not the usual color that no one would find with a cadaver, where it's a soft, pale white on an almost decomposing manner. No, in fact, they had a natural orange color tied to them. Some of them, in fact, were also found to have their hair losing their pigmentation, as if they were turning gray. And again, these are young people at that time, so they would not have had gray coloring in their hair, but some of them were found to have lost their pigmentation in that manner, and yet others were found to have, and this was only after the autopsy was being done to try to determine what caused their deaths, but somewhere along the way during that investigation, during the examination, some of these bodies were found to have distinct traces of radiation, at least in a higher level. I say that because there's actually radiation everywhere. It's normal to have. I remember reading that somewhere, that there's always a normal level of radiation everywhere. But when radiation goes to abnormal levels, that's when it becomes dangerous, and that's what was found in and around some of those bodies, and then also the clothing tied to those bodies. Pretty freaky stuff. So, now what caused their deaths? That has been a question that has plagued this incident now for who knows how many decades. Again, this incident was in 1959, but even after all these decades, well over 50 years, here we are in a place where we're no closer to the answer to what caused this incident than when it first started back in 1959. There are several popular theories. None of them are, in my opinion, more right than the other. I'll just explain the theories of them here because I don't have the answer, so I can't really give my own response as to what caused to them. But based on some of the evidence provided, again, it's up to you to decide what you believe caused this incident. The most popular theory seems to be that there was something not supernatural, but something, I guess, like paranormal about it. Like it was something UFO related. That tends to be the most common perception tied to this incident. And the main reason this is mentioned is because the mountain area there, again, it was populated by some Aborigines, and they were the ones again that helped the investigative team also try to find these bodies. They were a tribesman that went by the name of the Kolotat Shiakil. I hope I'm saying that right again. But they had, the tribesmen were called Mansi, but they had a term for this mountain area where the people were found called Kolotat Shiakil, that word I just mentioned. And the way it translated to English, if you were to take it from their native tongue and directly translate it to English, was Mountain of the Dead. And the reason for this is because apparently those tribesmen had originally lost, I believe it was either 8 or 9 different, other tribesmen before in and around that area, and they attributed it to it being like a place where reports were of strange orange lights found before in and around that area. Strange orange lights. The first thing you think of is anything tied to, let's say, UFOs. Something along those lines where here you have an outer region area, heavily underpopulated, very sparse. When it comes to the population, it's there, but they're hugely sparsely around. Nobody's close to one another. They're just natives that are living in and around the area, but there are still tales of people seeing bright orange lights in and around that area, bright like UFO type lights, and that's where the phrase Mountain of the Dead comes about, because people that have, the tribesmen that have gone in and around that area before, have turned up missing, and everybody attributes it to those strange orange lights. So could this have been something tied to UFOs, an incident where something grays or aliens, something tracked these poor people, the people in this group, the 10 expeditioners, and tracked them and then did this to them? I don't know. It's up to debate. It's up for you to decide. Most of the time, anything else tied to UFO contacts tend to involve like abductees, and those abductees end up coming back alive. They don't recall much of what happened to them, but at the same time, they're not dead. But here in this case, here we have physical damage tied to these people, and on top of that, we have something that was chasing them around, which is going highly against the usual tales tied to UFO visits. Like I don't think a UFO would purposely try to chase like a human, like in a cat and mouse type game, trying to scare the bejesus out of them. But if you're going by that explanation, then that's the only way you can, because of what happened to these people. So that's one of the theories. The other theory is that it's something involving the military, and what I mean is this: apparently the Soviet government at that time was testing secret weaponry in and around those locations, and they had that at that location because, again, it was sparsely populated. There weren't too many people around, at least people like from the Soviets. Instead, it was just those tribesmen, those native tribesmen, the Aborigines there. So it was a perfect area for them to conduct these super secret, classified to the highest level type weaponry that was far beyond anything else tested before. But somewhere along the lines, this group, these 10 expeditioners, accidentally stumbled upon some of these experiments, and because of that, they kind of paid with their lives. Now, if you're going with that explanation, then did the experiments themselves cause the deaths? Like, did some weapons, like, were they radioactive type weapons? Were they X-ray type weapons? Like, was it the kind of weaponry that caused the physical damage to the people? Again, you would have to stretch it, because some of them, like in one case, there was that person that was found with a 7-inch gash on their head, and then another woman who had her tongue ripped out. That it would be hard to explain how Russian weaponry would have caused those particular let's say damages, but in terms of the internal damage from some of the other people where they had the severe internal damage, again as if it was a severe car crash, but yet there was no external damage, you could kind of tie mysterious weaponry to that. So again, some people saying that it was the Soviet government that was creating strange weaponry in and around that area that caused the deaths of these people. That's a second explanation. And in fact, that team member, the one again that I keep mentioning, that lucky guy who only was not able to meet the same fate as these others because of him being sick, he actually believes this theory, that it was the Soviet government, and in fact he surmises that that's why they were so keen on helping out in terms of the investigation to try to find these missing people, because they were more keen on ensuring that nothing was found that could be tied to the weaponry that they were conducting, and so that's why they were so keen on making sure that these people were found. So another theory is that it's actually tied to like the cryptids and monsters that I've talked about in some of my past videos, and those are, there's a mysterious creature of some sort, some kind of abominable snowmen or snowman, if it's just one, that live in and around that area, and that these things or this thing was the one that found this group, because again this group wandered into its territory and it found this group and then began attacking them, and it was the thing that caused them to run out in sheer terror from their tent as if they were tearing it from the inside out, and in a strange way try to tear off their clothes, or at least the people tore off their clothes so that way they could try to mask their scent or have the creature go in another direction. There's that theory again, and I kind of believe this theory more because so much of that area there, again with it being so underpopulated, and then with the few population that's there, it's strictly the tribesmen. It's an area that's perfect for like a Bigfoot type abominable snowman, somebody that could live in and around that area for hundreds and hundreds of years and be never discovered, especially something that was perfectly adaptable to that weather, something that could easily survive in that weather and easily track and cover these people. I kind of tend to go more towards it being this. And then finally there are others that believe that it was nothing more than the group suffering from a severe case of cabin fever, because again here you have a group of people, 10 people, all of them originally living in normal civilization, living in and around buildings, in and around traffic, in cars, whatever, and then all of a sudden they're in an isolated location, completely cut off from the rest of the world, by themselves, 100%, no electricity, no amenities normally tied to civilization. Instead they're 100% on their own, and they suffered some form of cabin fever, where one person went crazy and then maybe others went crazy. It's the kind of stuff that you normally see in movies, like anybody can look up like that great movie The Thing, the original one from John Carpenter, where they kind of touched upon the cabin fever madness that was tied to the original group that they found, those Norwegians, I believe it was, that they found, and they were surmising that it was that occurred, and in some cases it was with that group as well from John Carpenter's movie, and it was the idea that there's actual proof that when somebody is close to dying and freezing cold, they go into a state where they start tearing off their clothes. I know it sounds weird, but it's real. Like, it's an actual thing. It's a state where people start removing their clothes, and the reason for it is because they're getting so much cold in their body that it feels like they're burning up, and so they start tearing off their clothes because they think that tearing it off will make them cool down, when in fact it's going to cause further coldness, which leads to feeling like they're burning up even more, which leads to less clothes. It's weird, but it's true. It's called paradoxal undressing. That is the official term. And another one that's tied to this group and the way some of the bodies were found is a term called terminal borrowing behavior. And this is the idea that when someone is close to dying from hypothermia, they tend to go into a state where they try to find any crevasse, any location, anything at all that they could just hide under and die away like that. And that's why when some people were found to have originally been found, let's say, hiding somewhere, it was as if people surmised, hey, this person was killed, and whoever killed them hid them in a remote location to try to hide their body. But no, it was actually the person themselves that did this, because they were in that crazy state of hypothermia, and the body, for whatever reason, naturally causes them to try to hide as much of their body as they can. Strange, but it's true. So that's the fourth theory, the idea that this is all 100% natural, that there was something involving the way human behavior is with cabin fever leading to the group experiencing paradoxal undressing and in some cases terminal borrowing behavior. So interesting stuff. So there you go, guys, the Dyatlov Pass incident. I know it's a long two set of videos, almost covering, I believe, something like 50 minutes. That's why I split it in two. But there was so much more information to talk about. Again, when you have a chance, check out that link that I have below. I had it in my first video as well. It involves even more information tied to this infamous incident. What do you guys think? Which of those four theories do you think this incident is attributed to? Is it UFO related? Is it anything involving the military government of Russia? Is it anything involving more of like cryptids like the snowmen, or is it all just 100% natural? Share your thoughts, post them below. If anyone has any other info tied to this incident, maybe anything that's more recent, it'll be interesting to see. Please post your comments and share them below. I'll be interested in to hear anything tied to it. So alright, everybody, thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.